It's hard to make that updatable in a device that might be out in the field and so forth. But that doesn't absolve you from just the nature of the fact that the cryptography will still age.
My question is, what are some of the important uses and also misuses of machine identities in organizations today?
The important part of it is it's another way of verifying the user or the person that is at the endpoint. It's just another part of identification and gives us the ability to trust that connection. So that's pretty valuable in these networks, that the machines probably outnumber all the users. So with people on multiple devices, sometimes that's going to be really, really critical to have. But the misuse is exactly the opposite of that, any insecurity of the device, any opening of the machine's identity or weakness in that area is easily then spoofed. And then suddenly we're trusting a device on our network that maybe isn't trusted or shouldn't even be there. So I think it's the very power of having the identity is the weakness is the misuse of that identity, and it not being verified well enough, I think is really the couple of areas that I see.
The other aspect is it's a lot more complex than people think. Like, it really comes down to the paradigm of static versus dynamic. So my name is Brad Laporte. That's static. I'm going to be Brad Laporte for the rest of my life. And, that's a finite thing that you can manage around. He's going to be Brad. And then, but the challenge is once you start looking at, the overall digital everything, is that you have things turning up and turning down like at the snap of your finger. All of a sudden an application is showing up you've never seen in your network before. It's virtual machines, it's everything. All these different non-human entities are rapidly, coming and going, and we have no easy way of doing that. And then in addition to that, there's no oversight and governance. So it comes down to each individual corporation to manage all of this. And it's very confusing. And to be honest with you, just like this whole space scares the heck out of me because it's so complex and it's so vast. And it's just like looking at this giant tidal wave. What do I do about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Brad, you touched on something there. The whole dynamic aspect of things, especially with these identities, right? They can't be static for various reasons, right? NIST and others have guidelines on how long you should keep keys of certain sizes and so forth in use. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we see, especially in IoT, because it is hard to update things, right? It's hard to make a device that's going to use a key or a certificate or something to identify itself or authenticate or verify a signature or so forth. It's hard to make that updatable in a device that might be out in the field and so forth. But that doesn't absolve you from just the nature of the fact that the cryptography will still age, right? We know that the keys and certificates and so forth that we're using today will be insecure in the future. And we know that because some of us who've been in the field for long enough, the keys and certificates that we were using when I started doing this aren't secure now. But we do see a lot more cases in IoT where people are putting you inject a certificate or key at manufacture time and you're good to go and we're done, right? But the problem is, if that's in the field for a long time, you've just created yourself almost a guaranteed security incident because that thing is going to become insecure, and now you're gonna have to figure out a way to deal with it unless you can make it updatable, right? And so we just, even though it's hard, security is security, right? So that is something that we do see, and you mentioned the number of devices is making the problem worse. I guess the other thing to point out is it's not always. Sometimes we see people will say, "Well, okay, it's just a fish tank heater or something. It's just whatever. Like, there's no security. Who cares if somebody hacks my fish tank, right?" Which is true potentially. Like, maybe you don't care that much about your fish. I don't know. But these devices can be used as a pathway into something bigger. So, like, there was a Las Vegas casino that was hacked. Yeah. Because someone pretended to be a fish tank heater. So that was actually a real example of, like, so a fish tank heater authentication was bad. with an insecure mechanism, and someone pretended to be this IoT device that doesn't have a lot of security value in and of itself, but that's the path into the casino, which has a whole lot of security value in it. So it's the whole system that these things are a part of that you have to look at holistically when you're thinking about machine identities. It's not just the machines themselves, it's the systems that they operate within.
Do you not think, though, it's often the case that people only realize these things when it's too late, when they've got to suddenly go and revoke 100,000 certificates and suddenly find that that's really tough to do, and that device doesn't allow me to update. That's where people need to, in some ways, be prepared for these things, and we should add these things into our testing. And very rarely does it get added in. Maybe people test their backup. I sometimes do wonder if they do really shut everything down and try and restore completely. But very rarely do you see this in machine IDs and everything, how to re-identify them all in a speedy way.
And standards and guidelines. That's something else that you mentioned, Brad, was there isn't, I'm not to call out manufacturers for doing the wrong thing, right? They're trying to build a device to get to market and so forth. There aren't a lot of standards and guidelines in a lot of these spaces on what you should be doing, right? So we can talk till we're blue in the face, but I think that's the other part is you're just starting to see some of that in some spaces, automotive, medical, aviation, a little bit. They're starting to see some standards, guidelines, so forth, but that's still the exception rather than the rule.
That's really in its infancy. Like sure, there's software, billware, material, so SBOM coming out and all that. Maybe there might be a interconnection here between these two topics, but I mean, what people need to understand is a lot of these devices that are out there, a lot of these machines, all they have is a login interface. There's nothing to it. And so if I have a credential that I've gotten from the dark web or underground market or whatever, and I'm able to get that information, I now own that device. And then I know I own it for life, because good luck trying to get it back. And then that's where command and control botnets come in, and you have all these secondary negative effects that end up happening.